right, sounds good. It is 4 o'clock on the button. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to the March 3rd meeting of the Utilities Advisory Commission. Let's see, I see on the screen, I guess we have enough for a quorum. I wouldn't mind giving us just another moment to see if another couple of commissioners are joining us. Well, we'll take roll calls slowly. Let's put it that way. So I'll just read down my list. That's the order on my Zoom screen. Commissioner Jackson.
Present.
Commissioner Johnston.
Present.
Vice Chair Siegel.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
I am here.
I think I just saw Commissioner Danaher.
I am here too.
All right. And I am here as well. So why don't we go ahead and move forward then. Agenda review and revisions. I don't believe we have any revisions to the agenda as it was posted. So with that, we can move to oral communications. I don't know, are there any members of the public that have indicated that they wish to speak on a topic not on today's agenda?
If anyone from the public wants to speak, please raise your hand. I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. Then with that, we can move into approval of the minutes. Are there any commissioners that have any comments or potential revisions to the minutes from last month's meeting?
I have a,
Yeah, Vice Chair Siegel.
sorry, there are a couple typos that actually are a little more substantive and a couple I can just give you later, but the two that I thought we'd want to correct was on page 6, the first paragraph of the item 2 discussion, it talks about carbon emissions. It's the third line, by 80% by the year. I believe you want 2030 and not 2023.
So could you say again what page that was?
Sorry, I'm going too fast. Page 6, at the first paragraph of the item 2 discussion, the third sentence, it says by the year 2023 for the 80 by 30, and that should be 2030. And then only one, I guess it's a little, but on page 3 in the big paragraph, 10 lines down, the second to the last word on the right, it should be as deferred instead of deferred. So we've deferred 2 sewer replacements by 1 year. And there are a couple other ones, but they're not worth, I can just send them along. They're not, I don't think they make a difference.
Just for those of us who want to follow on, can you say again where that differed versus deferred was?
Sure. Page 3, there's that one very large paragraph, and it's about the 10th sentence down, the second to the last word on the right. It said that sentence is.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you for that. Are there any other potential revisions? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes with the suggested revisions?
Also move.
I saw but didn't hear Commissioner Jackson try to second.
Second.
All right, and then we'll take a vote. Commissioner Jackson,
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston,
Approved.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Approve.
Commissioner Smith,
Approve.
Commissioner Danaher. You're on mute. Still on mute.
Approved.
Thank you. And I approve as well. So So we approve the minutes unanimously. There is not any unfinished business from last time, which means we will move straight to the Utilities Director report. Director Bachelor?
Chair Fussell. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Councilmember Philsef. I do have a few items. So one of the topics to talk a little bit about is called the switches on. The City of Palo Alto Utilities is a member of the Building Decarbonization Coalition and helping to fund the area-wide campaign about home electrification. The Switch is On campaign offers information resources to help residents who may want to convert appliances and home energy usage from natural gas to electricity. Palo Alto residents can take advantage of these rebates from CPAU for upcoming appliances such as heat pump water heaters, electric water heaters, through the, they go on to the site for cityofpaloalto.org/electrification. Sorry. I opened this up and it makes, are you getting background noise from me right now? Is that better? Can you hear me better now?
It's
All right.
better now.
All right,
It's
great.
better, but there was a lot of noise before.
Yeah, I'll try to make this quick. Sorry. I was trying to close my computer down. So anyway, cityofpaloalto.org/electrification to be able to overview the electrification. Also, too, as many as of you know that when the community wants to install electric EV chargers, infrastructure sometimes has to be upgraded. So we have a transformer upgrade rebate program for multifamilies and nonprofit properties in place. CPA is offering transformer upgrade rebates to help cover the cost of the service capacity fees and eligible customers. The program is available to owners and property managers, schools, nonprofit organizations, and multifamily properties. If the customer applies for an EV charger permit and receives notice that the EV charger installation will trigger an electric service capacity over and above the electric connection fees, they can apply for a rebate up to $100,000. So what we're saying is communities can, if we have in the past, we have made these customers actually pay for the upgrade in the transformers. So now we do have a way of offsetting those costs, and it could be up to $100,000. They can go to utility programs at cityofpaloalto.org, or they can call 329-2241 to get additional information on whatever their project is and when they install these EV chargers. Also, too, is that Palo Alto partners with Valley Water for water resource, and since the Santa Clara County has lifted the regional stay-at-home order, Valley Water is modifying some of its water programs. The programs that have components such as landscape surveys will resume with COVID-19 field safety protocols in place. Palo Alto residents and businesses can take advantage of these programs available countywide. As a reminder, Palo Alto rebates for activities such as replacing high water usage landscaping, lawns, and pools, and double since CPAU cost shares with Valley Water for the latest information. Go to the website at watersaving.org. That's watersaving.org. I have a couple of events to talk a little bit about. We're hosting a workshop on the 23rd titled Landscape Design 101. It hasn't been a great turnout in the past, and so we're going to be offering this again with partnerships with Bay Area Water Supply Conservation Agency, which is BOSCA, and the Valley Water. So it's 7 o'clock on March 23rd. And then it's talking a little bit about how to create a beautiful, sustainable, low water usage garden. Take advantage of the rebates, upgrade your landscaping irrigation systems and details at cityofpaloalto.org/workshops. Also, too, on February the 9th, which is coming or was passed, utility staff joined local journalism and sustainability advocates for an educational workshop about covering Eichler homes to all electric utility consumptions. CPAU's Home Efficiency Genie participated in the show, and Genie can assess homes for electrification. Approximately 40 people attended that workshop. And as you can imagine, as you know how Eichlers are built, they're very difficult to be able to be electrified. So there's some new ideas that we were able to present during that period of time, and there was 40 participants during that time frame. Also, too, is that you saw the email that was sent out to all of you, and again, thank you for if you made some comments about our website update. Our beta launch was completed last week. The launch was communicated through city channels, social media posts, through some of the web pages of our own, and we received about 8,200 page views, and city staff received about 90 responses online survey of things that they liked. The feedback was positive overall. The design is the most impressive that came out of the survey. As for the next steps, department specific feedbacks will provide each department actionable items will be addressed. Us in utilities, ours looks a little different still. We were able to get about 36 pages up, and we have about 4 weeks. End of this month, it will go live. So we have a team of 9 folks that are working on our web pages. We had about 420 so pages in the past. It was very difficult to get around. We were able to reduce that amount over 50%. And I think that if you looked at some of the utility pages, I think it'll be much easier for the community to get around into the website for the utility side. The last thing I wanted to bring up is that vaccination for utilities, and this is also for citywide as well. So we are now starting to vaccinate our staff. We are moving forward with the staff that is actually coming in on a daily basis, or at least more than 3 days a week. We are having set up appointments just as fire and PD did. We had 10 folks go today to get vaccinated. So we have still about 100 and a little over 100 folks in utilities that are coming in on a daily basis. And then once we get through that, if some of our folks that are still at home that have not been able to get vaccinated, then we'll start moving on with those folks at a later date. So we are encouraging our employees and staff that take advantage of this if they haven't been able to get in by themselves to their own providers or through the county itself. But this is a way that we're finding that we can at least get our folks that are here every day to be able to get vaccinated. So we're moving forward with that. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Director Batchelor. A lot of information there. Moving forward, we have a packed agenda for fairly substantial topics. Oh, Commissioner Johnston has a question. Go ahead, AC.
Just a question for Director Batchelor. How's our water supply? Are we looking at any cutbacks?
I think your question was, Commissioner Johnson, was how's our water supply and if we've seen any cutbacks at this period of time?
Right. Are we looking like we're going to need to cut back any water this summer?
I think we don't really anticipate any cutbacks at this period of time. We've done some studies. It seems to be fine right at this moment, but we don't see any changes since last month or the months in the past. And as we move forward at this period of time, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape.
Good news. Thank you.
All right, so our first item of new business is a staff recommendation that the UIC recommend the City Council approve 10-year energy efficiency goals for 2022 through 2031. And as usual, we will start by seeing if there is anyone in the public who wishes to comment on this topic before we go to the staff and UAC discussion.
Okay, if anyone wants to speak, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
All right, is there a staff presentation for this?
There is. And so, as all of you know, Palo Alto has been a long recognized cost-effective energy efficiency and high priority energy resources. And given the typical display of expensive electricity generating low energy bills for customers, we wanted to update our 10-year energy efficiency goals from 22 to 31. And tonight, or this afternoon, I'm sorry, Michael Babbitt is going to go ahead and move forward with the presentation on this. Micah?
Thanks, Dean. Yeah, thanks, Dean. Let me just get my screen share set up. So can everyone see my screen now? Great. So as Dean said, my name is Mike Babbitt. I'm a resource planner in the resource management division, and I'm excited to walk through our updated 10-year electric efficiency goals. So just a little bit of what we'll cover in the presentation. I'll provide some background on why we're talking about these goals, review these goals and see how they compare to some of our previous goals, discuss the impact on retail rates and average bills, and then wrap up with our recommended proposed goals. I'll also just point out right now that historically we've brought our gas efficiency goals at this time. When we've updated our electric goals, we're not doing that this year. We think that the SCAP is the right place to kind of finalize what our goals are around electrification. And then once we've set those goals in place, we'll revisit what our gas efficiency goals should be. So why are we talking about these 10-year efficiency goals? Ultimately, we're required to update 10-year energy efficiency goals by state law, AB 2021. We're required to set goals for 10 years and update these every 4 years currently. The frequency at which we've needed to update these goals has changed over time, but currently we're on an every 4-year cycle. Our energy efficiency programs are funded by state mandated public benefit surcharges, and these energy efficiency programs that we offer are required to be cost effective. So it's important that we have a good idea and plan of what's achievable from an energy efficiency perspective. We're required to adopt goals by March 15th of this year, and then we have 60 days to submit those goals to the California Energy Commission. So this graph is just a view of what our goals have been over the past. I talked about how we've updated them 4 different times in the past, and you can see where those goal levels were set in the blue, green, purple, and red bars. And then you can see what we actually achieved as a % of load reduction in each of those years. So by and large, we've met or exceeded our goals. We've been in a range of about 0.4 up to as much as 0.8% energy reduction in any given year. And the last set of goals that we adopted for the 2018 to 2017 were roughly 30% more aggressive than the business as usual scenario that we looked at when we developed the model. And we did pretty well the first 2 years in exceeding those goals. And then in 2020, we saw a fairly significant decline in overall savings. And I'll talk about this a little bit more. So just a little bit on the model and where these goals come from. Palo Alto, as well as all the other publicly owned utilities in California, worked with their agencies, Northern California Power Agency, for us, CMUA, and we hired a consultant who has experience developing potential studies for utilities across the nation. The model is a bottoms-up model in terms of estimating what achievable efficiency is. So it starts out by looking at all of the technical potential. So based on all of the available technology that's out in the field, what's possible. And then it layers on the economics of specific technologies. How much do they cost? How much do they save? How long do they last? And then finally, there's this third layer of the market potential. So this is more, what is the consumer awareness around these technologies? How quickly can they be adopted? So the technical potential is the largest, then it shrinks down into the economic, and then it shrinks further into the market level. The model takes into account our past performance. So, it's getting a sense of what programs have we offered historically, and it's in that sense, it's tried to be based in reality. It's looking at our supply costs, our retail rates, our expected load forecast, and it's taking all of these different factors into account in trying to determine what's going to be cost effective from an energy efficiency standpoint. And then the final point that I'll make on the model is that an economic recovery period has been built into the model. We saw a pretty significant decline in 2020, and we're expecting a similar decline in savings in 2021. So we've factored that into the way that we've structured our goals. In terms of energy savings that we expect to be able to achieve, they're largely driven by our non-residential customers. 80% of our electric usage is done by our non-residential customers, and so that's really the lion's share of the savings that we're anticipating. That 80% breaks down into 44% lighting, 16% HVAC, and then 20% what we're calling non-residential comprehensive. This could include things like building envelope, smart controls, etc. We're also anticipating or expecting to be able to achieve a significant amount of savings from our home energy report that will go out to our residential customers. And then in 2026, we're expecting to be able to generate a significant amount of savings through conservation voltage reduction, which we'll be able to start reducing voltages once we have advanced metering infrastructure in place. So this graph is just a view of our goals on a percentage of our load, also compared to the last two goal setting efforts that we made. So we're starting in 2022 at 0.5%. That ramps up into 2024 into 0.55 and then 0.6. And then when we launch the CVR program, we expect to be in the 0.75 range. This is relatively in line with where we were during the 2014 goal setting period, and it's less than where we were in the last one. But as we stated earlier, the previous goals were rather aggressive, and they're not really realistic at this time, given what we've seen in the last few years. This graph is just kind of another way to look at what I just showed. It's instead of on a percentage basis, it's the absolute energy savings values. So we've saved anywhere from 4,500 to 7,500 megawatt hours in any given year, and our goals are set to be at around 4,500 starting in 2022, and then ramping up into the 7,000 megawatt hour range in the outer years once we have CVR in place. In addition to focusing on the annual savings, we're also very interested in the kind of the cumulative or the lifetime impacts of energy efficiency measures and what they have on our overall load at the utility. So if we add up the savings over the 10 years and look at what the cumulative impact is, we're expecting about a 4.5% reduction in our total load. This is driven by the fact that energy measures have different effective useful lives that they last for. So a boiler replacement project may last 20 years that we're able to expect to see energy savings from, versus maybe behavioral type measures that have a shorter life period. So the model takes all of this into account in terms of what measures we expect to be able to implement over this time frame. just to touch on the impact on rates, energy efficiency obviously reduces the amount of energy that we're selling to customers. We have certain fixed costs that we recover through our rates. So when we reduce the amount of energy that we're selling, it puts an upward pressure on our rates. Rates obviously aren't the only thing to focus on. We want to make sure that our customer bills are being reduced at the same time. The average customer bills are expected to decrease over the life of these energy efficiency measures, and the retail rates we estimate could increase as much as 3.5% over the same 10-year time period. What happens with our rates? There's a decent amount of unknown with what happens to our load overall. If we continue to see load growth from EV charging and building electrification, that could mitigate some of the retail rate increases that could come about as a result of energy efficiency. So with that, I'll just recap the goals that we're setting out. They start at this 0.5 range, increased 0.55, and then 0.6, and then rise up to the 0.75, 0.8 in the remaining 6 years. And our motion is that the Utilities Advisory Commission recommend that Council approve these proposed annual and cumulative electric goals. With that, I look forward to further discussion and any questions I can answer.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Commissioners, you can raise your virtual or your real hand. Commissioner Johnston.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It's quite comprehensible to me, but I had one question about whether you could kind of elaborate a little bit on the conservation voltage reduction, what that is and how we will be able to implement it once we get the AMI in place.
Sure. So I guess the main idea is that we're able to reduce the voltage at various feeders across our distribution system. By doing that, we're able to reduce energy that is ultimately being consumed by the end use customers. I'm not an expert on how the technology works, but I guess my basic understanding is that we have real-time insight into what the voltage is across all of our feeders. And by having that information, we can start to dial the voltage up or down based on what the need is.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, Mr. Babbitt. A couple of questions on the cumulative savings potential. We have an anticipated of 4.5% anticipated savings by 2031. Is that an average or is it a high or low, or where is that? Where's your sensitivity?
Yeah, so are you asking average relative to historically?
Yeah, when you ran the model for your potential savings, does 4.5% land in the middle of your model, or does it land at the high end, or does it land in the low end of your potential savings by 2031? So
it's not so much of a sensitivity so much as just an output of the model. It's really just a hard calculation around based on what energy efficiency measures we install in year one and how long they last, added to the energy efficiency measures that we install in year two and how long they last. And so it's not, I guess I wouldn't say that it's a lower or a higher or middle. It's really just an output. And I think
okay.
And the variability is really more around whether or not we're implementing measures that have a longer life. So if we install a bunch of energy efficiency measures that last for 20 years, those energy savings are going to accumulate more for longer.
Terrific. Okay, so that sort of leads me to my next questions. In the incremental savings leading up to 4.5% on the savings, sorry, on your slide 11, we show an incremental increase from 0.5% to 0.55, 0.6 to 0.75. The 2025 goal to the 2026 goal, I understand that's the implementation of AMI and hopefully voltage reduction coming out of that. What are the incremental steps that we're taking in 2023 and 2024 and 2025 that will lead us to a half a point, sorry, 5/100ths of a point improvement over that period?
Yeah, so it's basically the fact that we're installing new energy efficiency measures every year that are adding to that cumulative total.
And can you give me a couple of examples that are targeted for 24 and 25?
Yeah, so if we go back to the savings potential by end use, where we have, where we expect the savings to come from, it's 44% lighting, 16%, 16 to 20% HVAC. There's an assumption in the model that, based on technology and economics and market potential, that there's that amount of savings to be had across these end uses. So lighting projects at our commercial customers, HVAC projects, which could be something like a chiller optimization, a boiler replacement, any number of various energy efficiency measures that would be implemented.
Okay, so sorry, and this is more just a general comment than it is a question. I am a little bit concerned that there seems to be an underlying assumption that life is going to go back to normal in a commercial office environment. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I do think that we will see significant populations within a commercial environment, literally not halved, but it is anticipated that 2/3 of the workforce will be in the office and 1/3 will be at home at any one point in time. So I would hope that we're thinking about that, because there is a strong possibility that our commercial customer will not be as large as it was prior to the COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. Thanks for the comment. I guess I'll just maybe respond and say that baked into the model is a load forecast. And so what our load looks like 5 years out is our best guess. And I guess if our load falls by 60% because we don't have commercial customers, then these goals on a percent of our load basis should still be in line. The absolute values won't make sense if that were to happen.
Understood. Yep, understood. Okay, cool. Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other commissioners? Commissioner Danaher.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Babbitt. Just to be clear, if we electrify, if we incent people, say, to replace their gas ranges with induction ranges, or their gas water heaters with electric heat pump water heaters, that's not included in energy efficiency. Is that correct?
So these goals are just focused on electrical energy efficiency. And so that would be, right here, we're talking about replacing electrical devices with more efficient electrical devices. The scenarios that you just pointed out would be replacing a gas unit with an electrical unit. We're not incorporating any of those potential electrification measures into this model. Okay. And similarly, we haven't developed a model or a view of what our gas efficiency goals should be, because they're so connected to what our electrification goals will be.
Right. I guess my overall concern, and if I throw in there, electrification of transportation and putting in charging networks, is that looking at each of these things in separate buckets doesn't allow us to pick the best overall, bang for your buck on where you spend the money. So if it's, for example, better spent on electrification of gas appliances than on improving the efficiency of this. I know the state mandated a lot of this, but it doesn't make us let us make those comparisons. And I would hope as we go forward, we start getting a model that lets us look at all the different carbon savings on a cost basis and decide where we get the most bang for our buck.
Commissioner, I'll just, Jonathan Abenshine, Assistant Director of Utilities Resource Management. I'll just jump in and say that this is where the SCAP modeling ends up coming into play. But I will also say that efficiency measures by nature save money. And as a result, they are almost universally the lowest cost measures to implement before electrification. The challenge is that they're limited in the maximum potential that you can accumulate. So we are making
but
those
for
cross
Jonathan,
comparisons.
I appreciate that, and you're right, of course. But for example, you spend money helping people replace single pane with double pane windows, which reduces gas consumption but doesn't fit into electric efficiency, or do you spend it getting them to do more efficient electric appliances? We got to be able to ideally figure out where we get the most bang for the buck.
Yes, we are looking across all of those measures.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Vice Chair Siegel, your hand was up earlier and then it disappeared. Did you have?
Yeah, I guess some of my questions were answered, but I did have one very basic question on the residential home energy reports. What program is that?
We call it our home energy and water reports. It's a report that will be delivered to our residential customers that outlines. Actually, I'm not the right person to speak about it. Jonathan, do you have a little more information, or is?
Yes, so the Home Energy Reports program is the successor to the O-Power reports that we were putting out probably 6 or 7 years ago now, trying to address some of the concerns that were raised with those reports in terms of the way that they were formatted and the perceptions that people had about them. The idea is that by providing people information about their consumption and along with tips on how to reduce consumption and links to programs, that there's an energy savings. Historically, it's been our most cost-effective program that reaches the greatest number of customers and can serve as a communications channel also for new programs as well.
Okay, so as I recall, that old program told you on your bill how you were doing relative to your neighbors. And there was some objection because people felt that it wasn't apples to apples and everybody wanted to be better than their neighbors, and they weren't necessarily, right? But as I recall, it was also hugely effective for very, very low cost. With the changes that we're implementing, are we, I guess I don't want to go, I guess I'm concerned about going so far to accommodate people feeling, that they're not getting the credit they deserve, that we're not also going to get the reductions that we saw before.
I think we would share the same concern, and we have no intention of going so far that it's going to affect the savings. I think there was a lot of room when looking at the old reports. There's a lot of room for just friendlier messaging of the same information, and that's more what we're going for, and also just trying to be inclusive of more customer groups than we were before.
Okay, that was my other question. Will we be expanding it at all to commercial, or is that even possible?
We've been looking at options for commercial. We had a small and medium business program that we were primed to launch in March of 2020, and then some things happened around us that made it a little hard to launch it. And we're looking at how we can relaunch that program. But part of the program involved installing sensors at businesses to be able to monitor and proactively give them tips on how to configure things like HVAC or other equipment. It's not so easy to do the types of programs where you provide people information when we're dealing with commercial customers, because they're not as comparable to each other. So you really have to have more of a customized approach. And if we can find a way to launch a program like that again, I think we are looking at all kinds of options for providing those sort of more custom tailored informational approaches to reducing, helping businesses reduce their usage.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Jackson?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to sort of ditto or plus one what Commissioner Danaher said. I think that, I think when I look at electrification, if you swap out a gas appliance for an electric appliance, I'm here to tell you, you're going to use more electricity than you used to use. So it doesn't matter what electricity usage is going to go up as people electrify. I'm pretty sure about that. So it's just, I think it doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to do efficiency programs, but I think Commissioner Danaher's perspective on trying to understand where we put the money and what the benefit is and what, at a more comprehensive level does sound like a pretty good idea to me. Then the other thing is this new version of the energy reporting sounds like a good idea too. I think that as we have AMI, and to the extent that AMI allows homeowners and residents to get real-time readings of what their energy usage, in my personal experience, that could be a pretty valuable tool. To make a long story short, in my own electrification efforts, I did that on my own. I put in a very high level, whole home energy meter, and also then broke out on key electric loads within that. And I have a pretty fine-grained view of all that now. And I found some surprising things, which has motivated conservation and using technology to not power certain things at certain times, so forth. So that's helped me to get my total post-electrification electric usage closer to where it was before. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Are there any other comments? I had a couple of questions, just clarifying questions. So the EE programs are funded by the state mandated public benefit surcharge. Does the state specify an amount of money that has to be spent, or a percentage of those public benefit surcharges that have to be spent?
They don't mandate a specific amount of spending. The surcharge is 2.85% of every kilowatt hour that we sell. That creates a budget. These programs that we offer oftentimes run for 5+ years. Our C&I programs are performance-based, and so
Sorry, what's C&I?
Our commercial and
industrial?
Our commercial and industrial programs are performance-based, so we pay when projects are completed. So if we complete more projects in 1 year, we might spend a lot more money. Similarly, if we complete less, we'll spend less. And so, yeah, there's no mandated amount of spending per year. We need to understand what we're going to be collecting and then be strategic about how to use our resources effectively.
And so the state simply mandates that the utility have a plan, but a lot of the parameters of the plan are at the city's discretion, and that's precisely what we're discussing right now, is sort of where's the sweet spot for City of Palo Alto.
Yeah, so we could spend a lot of time talking about what we're allowed to do with public benefits monies, but they break into 4 categories: cost-effective energy efficiency, low-income energy efficiency, research and development, and a broad category around renewables.
Okay, that's helpful. And actually, a follow-up question around cost-effective. I assume that means that the cost of the saved energy is greater than the cost of the remedy or the program.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of different ways to look at cost effectiveness. I think the way that we tend to look at it is, how much does it cost us to save that energy versus how much would it cost us to go buy that energy? And so,
Okay, because that was my question, was that, is it the cost of the utility or is it the cost of the customer?
cost of the utility.
Okay.
But you can certainly look at it from the perspective of the cost of the customer or the cost to society. And each way that you look at it has different pros and cons.
But for our
But
purposes, it's defined as the cost of the utility.
yeah, so we're trying to manage our electric portfolio, and we want to make sure that any energy efficiency that we're creating or doing is going to be lower cost than going and buying new supply.
Right. And then just to the example that Commissioner Danaher and Commissioner Jackson raised, there's nothing in these goals that creates a disincentive for customers to electrify. Is there? I mean, anybody can still take advantage of the energy efficiency programs, and the way they're defined, there's just a model that spits out a percentage that if customer X upgraded equipment Y, then that
Yeah, so this is really around electric efficiency. So all electrification measures, I think, are assuming that you're switching from gas to electric. And so we're not doing anything here to incentivize switching from gas to electric. It's really just focused around more efficient electrical devices.
Right, and I guess that's the point I'm making, is that there's nothing at odds with electrification. It's not two different programs fighting against each other.
Correct.
Electric efficiency can stand on its own and is not competing with efforts to electrify.
That's accurate.
Well, thank you. I think that is it for me in terms of questions. Councilmember Philseth, did you have any thoughts or questions?
Nope.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'm wondering if there is a motion.
I'll move that that the UAC recommends to the City Council to approve the 10-year efficiency goals presented just now.
I'll second.
All right, we'll do a roll call. Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Vice Chair Siegel.
Sorry, when the box moves, I can't unmute it. Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Danaher,
Yes.
and I vote to approve the motion as well. So it carries unanimously. Thank you very much. How are we tracking on time? We are tracking 5 minutes ahead. This is great. So why don't we move straight into our next topic, which is around the gas utility financial plan, including some proposed transfers and amending some rate schedules. And we will go first and see if there is anybody from the public who wishes to comment.
If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
All right, then. Is there a staff presentation?
There is. So we'll just move forward with the gas of financial plans first. And so Eric Kennedy and Lisa Valaire from Power Resources will be making the presentation.
Good evening, commissioners.
Eric?
Yes. Let me see.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Let's see, am I presenting? See the, there we go. Good evening, commissioners, councilmember Philseth. So tonight, what we're bringing to you is actually the same recommendation, or same as we discussed during the preliminary financial plans, a 3% gas rate increase for FY 2022. So a proposal is this, a 3% overall gas rate increase for FY 2022. We have in this plan an alternative 0% rate increase for 22, but that would involve about 5.4 million in one-time cost reductions. We've also put together a 2% alternative rate increase proposal as well that I'll be taking to finance. So there are some different ways that we could do this, but that would also include about $750,000 to $1 million in one-time cost reductions. This proposal assumes a sales decline of about 6 to 8% in FY22, which is actually about what we're seeing. So we're feeling confident with those projections. We do say, however, that if for some reason sales were declined by, say, by up to 10%, that we might need an additional $1 million in expense reductions. This proposal, the plans that we have assume that none of the future rate increases will go above 5%. And in here, we have a gas main replacement project is already, GMR 24 has been reduced by $2 million in FY23. And that's already been factored into our equation, so no additional cost cuts beyond this. As a bit of background, about 1/3 of our gas rates are supply related. So supply, transmission, environmental charges, these are all pass-through charges. And about 2/3 are related to distribution, CIP related charges. And that's what we actually go about setting in terms of our rate proposals. So when I say a 3% overall rate increase, I am increasing distribution rates by 5%, assuming that supply charges remain flat to get an overall 3% rate increase. Utility cost structure runs about 60% distribution and about 40% supply side. As you can see, the majority of our costs are distribution related, and gas supply makes up about 1/3. And let me know if you want me to speed through some of these slides, because I believe you might have already seen them before during the preliminary forecast phase. But
I think it's okay to take them at a good clip.
Okay, great. So in terms of our future projections, we're assuming that supply-related charges are going to increase by about 4% per year on average through the forecast horizon. Capital and distribution-related increases by about 2 to 3% per year following inflation and salary and benefit increases. For the again, I think I've already spoke a bit about supply cost drivers. Probably the most volatile one is the monthly commodity charge, and we might have heard about fluctuations in the market that we've seen due to recent cold weather. Here in California, it only increased prices by a little bit for this upcoming month. In other parts of the country have seen quite rapid, quite large increases. But that is the most variable part of our rate, and that can swing wildly. And that's why, for purposes of rate setting, we get market indications of what we think gas market prices are going to do over the next 5 years. Those change literally day by day. So when I talk about changing rates, I sort of set those static and assume they will not see a change year over year from last year. And so that what we're talking about is just purely distribution related increases. Transmission related rates are something that are passed through directly from PG&E, relates to their pipeline and infrastructure work. And that's something that we're charged on a rate schedule directly from them. Cap and trade costs are what we're required to purchase allowances to offset our natural gas usage. And those are based upon what the California carbon cap and trade market auction prices are at. Currently, they're trending a little bit above the floor, but that's about where they are cycling currently. And carbon neutral gas plant costs. So we buy additional offsets to help green up our gas that way. I already mentioned distribution cost trends about 2 to 3% per year going forward. Main drivers, health, retirement, associated overhead costs. We do know that underground construction costs still increasing, even though we've seen relative economic downturn. We haven't really seen bids coming down on construction costs. And we also do have the cross-bore project that we are still planning on funding and working through. So one of the big things about COVID is we've had, there's been much debate about what gas usage will do, both in the short term and the long term. And what we've been seeing is something along the lines of that blue medium recovery trend. And so that's what we're seeing for FY 21-22. We're following right about along that path. There is always a question of what will the final recovery be? I believe that's been brought up earlier. That it all comes back to that long-term red trend line. But it's possible that that could end up lower depending on what what customer usage ends up shaking out over the long run, and rates will be adjusted accordingly. So here is our cost and revenue projections. We're looking at 3% rate increase in FY23 with 5% rate increases, probably for about the next 3 years. FY26, if everything levels off, we might probably see about anywhere between 0 to maybe 1 to 2% rate increase, but that's our current projection right now. This chart, I think, is the first time we're seeing it tonight. Just to highlight, the red line highlights revenues and the bars discuss costs. So here, the big thing, you can see that supply costs are going up, but maintaining relative stability going forward. Operations costs are increasing in the short term, again, to cover cross-border related charges, but then increasing by about 2 to 3% per year. The bar that's fluctuating the most is the capital investment bar, and that is reflective of the fact that we're planning on doing a main replacement every other year instead of every year, which is what our eventual goal is in the utility. But for the short term, for this 5-year plan, we're assuming that every other year will be the cycle going forward. With this proposal, the 3 and future 5s, we keep the gas operating reserves within the guideline ranges. So we dropped near minimum in FY23 and FY25, but I think we're still in a comfortable range going forward. Here is so taking a couple of different snapshots of rates over time. With the proposed rates, it's actually about a 3% across the board. So residential, commercial, everyone would see roughly about a 3% rate increase. And this here highlights what you would see between an average winter and average summer month and what commercial customers could look to expect. Current bill comparisons, we are well below PG&E when it comes to our residential rates, especially in the wintertime. We're anywhere between 20 to 30% lower. Summer is a little bit less just because we have a monthly customer charge, whereas PG&E does not. So that changes what kind of savings you see between the various periods. And so again, during low gas usage months, you'd see a little bit less of the savings relative to PG&E. Commercial savings for small customers can range between like 1 to 12%. For larger customers, it's about 15% higher. Again, it's because we have a fixed charge. The other reason is that PG&E's commercial charges are actually on a declining rate. So they front load a lot of their distribution cost into the first 4,000 therms used, and then it drops off after that. And so we have a slightly different basis here. We have the distribution costs ranging throughout the entire range of our rate. Again, monthly rate comparison. Once you average everything out, looking at FY20 as a total, we were about 8, or FY19 rather, so this is, I'm sorry, not an updated slide. We were about 8% below PG&E for the whole of calendar year 19. And of course, we have an alternate here. I'll show you. It's the 0%. Graphically, this doesn't look like much different from what you saw on the previous slide. And here as well, what we would end up getting is projected operating reserves, but we would need between about, roughly about $4.7 to $5 million in cuts. Part of this will be a factor of what we choose to put. We were trying to also fund a CIP reserve during this period in time. And if I can really drop that down and keep it at zero, then we don't need to cut quite as much, but we're still going to require significant cuts if we have a 0% rate increase in FY 2022, and then only 5% rate increases going forward. So with that, they have the recommendation. Our recommendation is to adopt the fiscal year 2022 gas financial plan. In here, we also have something that I should also mention is transfers. We're going to take out all the remaining funds, as we've mentioned in prior financial plans. All the rate stabilization reserve money, move it to the operations reserve, as well as pulling out what is related specifically to the cap and trade program that we've earned over time, and move that into a separate cap and trade reserve for ease of accounting and clarity. We are, by creating a new reserve, we're going to need to amend the gas utility reserve management practices as well. And the overall resolution will be to adopt a 5% rate increase, resulting in a 3% overall rate increase to gas rates. And with that, that ends my presentation, and I look forward to any questions you may have. Hopefully not too fast.
Thank you very much for that. Commissioners, Commissioner Johnston.
So thank you for that report. And I've got two questions. First, we were talking about the alternative scenarios, and it would require some cost reductions. And I assume the cost reductions would largely be deferring CIP projects. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And that's pretty much the main area that we would have to trim
Right.
from. Yeah.
The second is I understand that you're recommending a 5% increase in the rate for distribution, and you say that works out as a 3% overall increase because you're assuming zero increase on the gas costs. But in the report, on page 3 of the report, you say that the recent market indications have led staff to project supply cost increases around 4.1% annually, so not 0%. And that would, if the supply costs increase by 4.1%, it results in an additional 1.2% increase in the overall customer bill. So am I understanding that to be, if the supply costs increase as you project them to, the increase in the customer bill is more like 4.2%? Is that, did I get that right?
That would be a reasonable assumption, assuming that if gas prices escalate to that rate, yes.
So given your projection, shouldn't we really be looking at this as a 4%, somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5% increase in customer bills?
It's potentially a 4 to 4.5% rate increase in customer bills, but if gas prices come down, then that could end up being, so again, that's why we don't try to, we provide the estimation of or the current snapshot of where we think gas supply rates could go, but because they're passed through, not to say we throw up our hands, but we also, because we can't really accurately say, in the first time when I find out about gas commodity prices is the first day of the month. So, and I said, as I was looking 2 weeks ago, they were expecting prices to be skyrocketing, and then situation changed and gas prices only came up by just a little bit for March. So really our gas supply estimations for commodity, they're good at the time that we make them, and by the time we finally get to the month of, they can vary widely. So that's why we try not to discuss it, and we keep it stable in terms of our projections when we discuss rate increases. I mean, the other way to say it is we're projecting a 5% distribution rate increase, and that's it. And how it ends up shaking out in supply, is, you know, can vary widely. And in some months, we actually see less than the 3% because supply prices come down from where they were in prior year. So,
Commissioner, the only thing I'll just add there is that the reason we present it this way is so that you know the effect of your actions tonight on the bill. But I think the way you're laying it out is very reasonable. We should be looking at, you can look at it as a 4% potential increase if supply costs end up going according to forecast, perhaps more like a 3 to 5%, or even 2.5 to 5%, depending on where prices go.
Right, and that's my point. I just think that we need to be realistic. I understand that you can't project the supply costs with precision, but you have made a projection. And that's got to be based on something, your experience and what you're seeing in the market. And so, I mean, I don't object to this. I just think that we ought to be realistic and recognize that what we're really looking at is something more than a 3% increase to customers.
So I think we could work on working that into the presentations as well as the report. So it's a little bit more on people's minds during the discussion.
Right, because if customers hear that that it's going to be a 3% overall increase in their bills, and then they get hit with 4.5%, somebody's going to say, what happened? Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? Well, I'll go then. I have a couple. Oh, actually, well, I'll go and then I'll let Councilmember Filseth speak. You mentioned that the cap and trade reserve is a new reserve and is being created for sort of accounting and clarity, and that it will be funded by funds that the city has accumulated from selling cap and trade allowances. My question is sort of, and then what? Most reserves have a purpose of how they will be spent. And is there a plan for spending the funds from the sale of cap and trade allowances?
I can speak to that, Chair Forcell. So we have the rough outlines of a plan about how we'd like to use those funds, but we really need to get to council with the SCAP and nail down an implementation plan that the council and the entire community is comfortable with, and then we'll be able to share something a little firmer.
But it is, broadly speaking, SCAP related.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. And another question is, the compressed natural gas rate schedule caught my eye, and I'm just curious, how many customers are on that rate schedule, and is it, are they businesses that like operate a fleet, or are there sort of individual owners of compressed natural gas vehicles that go to some kind of filling station and pay this rate, or just how does that work?
So actually the compressed natural gas rate, we only have the one filling station at the municipal service yard. And so that's the rate that goes to serve that particular set of pumps. So we don't have any other customers on the CNG rate.
And so that rate is, can anybody who owns a vehicle go there and this is the rate that they pay, or that's the rate that the operator of that set of pumps pays the utility? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, that's the rate that we charge to Public Works, who operates the facility, for the purchase of the natural gas that they turn around and sell. I'm not sure what rate that they charge to customers, or how they they operate. Yeah.
Okay.
But they sell to city fleets, I believe. School buses as well. Fleets are filled up there.
Oh, interesting.
So, yes.
Okay. And then why is the distribution charge on the compressed natural gas rate schedule so much lower than the distribution rate for all the other rate schedules?
So the situation with that particular line is a bit special compared to all the rest of the customers. There is a single meter coming directly from PG&E serving the CNG, and it runs directly to that facility.
So there's very little distribution infrastructure.
There is no distribution infrastructure. Essentially, it's just really admin time and other factors are put into it, but we don't really have per se any pipeline that we maintain going to that facility.
Gotcha. And then my last question has to do with I think it was represented in one of the bar charts that you showed, and is also on page 43 of the gas utility financial plan. There's the item of transfers to the general fund. That's on the order of $7-ish million a year. And I don't know if this is something that you can comment on because there's pending litigation with another party in the city, but I believe that that transfer is under question in this lawsuit. And I guess I'm just wondering, by continuing to have this in the budget, is the city setting itself up for future lawsuits?
I'm not sure that this is something we can speak to without having the attorney's involvement.
Okay.
We've reviewed our forecast with the attorneys, and they're comfortable with the way that we're laying things out right now. Is there any? I'll look to Eric or Dean to see if there's anything that they want to add on this topic.
No, I don't. I think that Jonathan laid it out. I think at this period of time, we'd have to have a conversation, have legal involved with it. But as we've talked to them about moving forward in this year's budget, making this transfer is going to be fine for us at this period of time.
Okay. Fair enough. That was it for me. Councilmember Felseth.
I had a low-level technical question, but just let me weigh in on that one just for a second here. Yeah, I think that's a great question. The plan of record's the plan of record until there's a new plan of record, and so this is still the plan of record, but everybody's aware of this. And I suspect it will get resolved definitively in a relatively quick time frame, that is in a year or two, as opposed to another decade or something like that. And so I think the way it's accounted for, if legal's okay with it, I think we on council, we're aware of this, and as long as there's an asterisk and people notice it when it comes and say, I think we're okay. I wanted to ask a slightly different question, and I think I read this in the staff report, package, but let me just make sure I understood it right. When we talk about the distribution cost versus the commodity cost, the distribution cost, the one that's 5%, that's just us within the borders of Palo Alto, right? Because we pay PG&E a certain amount to distribute gas from other places to Palo Alto. But if I understood that right, what we pay PG&E for distribution is actually in the commodity cost. Did I understand that right?
So yeah, it's part of there's a transportation pass-through rate that we charge, and that is the cost for the PG&E assesses to us at Palo Alto specifically to transport gas from the California border to PG&E Citygate, where we take delivery of gas. So yeah, everything related to their operations and maintenance related cost within California is lumped into that rate.
Within California.
Okay. California, right. But everything related to Palo Alto's borders is within our distribution cost.
So if there's, big dislocations in PG&E's, distribution costs, then we'll see that in our commodity rates as opposed to distribution rates. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Looks like that's it for discussion and questions. Are there any commissioners wishing to make a motion? Oh, hold on. Commissioner Danaher. You're on mute.
Want to thank Mr. Filseth for an excellent presentation. I'm conscious also we were very restrained last year at the beginning of the pandemic on our increases, and I think we have to budget for our needs. So I move that we approve the proposed resolution from staff.
And again, to clarify, that is with the 5% increase onto the distribution charge.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Commissioners Johnson and Jackson jointly second the motion. I'll go ahead and take roll. Commissioner Jackson.
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston.
Yes.
Vice Chair Siegel.
Approve.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes, approved.
Commissioner Danaher.
Approved.
And I approve as well. And I echo the appreciation for Eric Keniston for an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we usually take a break at about the halfway point, which we have reached. So let's see, by my clock, it's 5:17. How about if we come back at 5:25? All right, we'll take a short recess and come back at 5:25. Thanks. All right. All right, why don't we go ahead and get restarted. The next item of business is the financial plan for the electric utility. as well as some proposed reserve transfers and rate schedule changes. So why don't we start as usual? Are there any members of the public that want to speak about electric financial planning?
If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand. No hands are raised.
All righty. All right, I assume there's a staff presentation for this as well?
There is. So Eric will cover again the electric financial projections.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Oh. So, hello again. So this is the Electric Utility 2022 financial plan and projections. And this one here is actually fairly simple. Again, similar to what we brought you last time, we are not proposing any rate, no overall rate increase for the electric fund for FY 2022. That said, something we are recommending increasing the Palo Alto Green charges, bringing those up to market base. So they'll be going from 0.2 of a penny to, 0.2 of a cent up to 0.6 of a cent for those customers on Palo Alto Green. And we also are going to, we are proposing to increase the payback rates for the net energy metering program rates to bring those up to current projections of avoided costs. But otherwise, our proposal is for no general changes to electric rates this upcoming year. Major parts to note, we still have an outstanding loan with the Electric Special Projects Reserve. We've changed that to pay that back. We're planning on paying back the remaining $5 million this year. In light of everything, we have spaced that out and smoothed it to be only $1 million repayments going forward. So I think that's the one major change that we've had. I can skip through this pretty quick. On the electric side, we're about 60% supply, 40% distribution. Again, one of the largest changes in our electric portfolio is in the transmission related costs, which are paid to the California grid. Those are projected to increase probably by the largest percent of all of our costs going forward. Looking at, supply is increasing by about 2% per year. Distribution, it looks like it's decreasing a little bit, but that's only because we have some short-term projects, and then those are decreasing by each time you hit FY 2026. Transmission-related costs, like I said earlier, are growing by far the largest component. We're estimating by upwards of about 10% per year, and that's to connect new sources onto the California grid. We will pay those through our connection charges. We will pay those to the grid as we go forward, but our actual cost of generation is going down a little bit. Pardon me. So most of our renewable projects have come online. Longer term generation costs are fairly stable or even decreasing going forward. As I said, transmission costs are what are increasing by far the most. Distribution operations are increasing about 3% per year, as we've seen in our other utilities, but our capital projections in FY26 are lower than what we have in the upfront. In FY22, we're starting on some of the smart grid project, and so that's increasing costs in the upfront. Probably could have extracted that out for purposes of this bar and made it a little bit easier to show, but for completeness, putting it all in there. Much of this has already been discussed. And distribution cost drivers, our electric residential bills are about 37% below PG&E. And here's a wider spectrum view for both residential and commercial bills. You can see that we are, for any measure of commercial, we're lower. For pretty much any measure, actually for all measures of residential, we're lower. Santa Clara is lower than us for the most part. But again, they have different generation resources than we do. So it's not quite an apples to apples comparison in terms of that. Here, we're projecting that we can do a 0% rate increase for FY22 with 5% rate increases for the next 2 years. And then those costs will, those rate projections will level out over time. But our supply operating reserve projections, we're getting close to minimum in FY23, but coming back up to target level by the end of the financial planning period in 26. We are projecting that red line here shows our risk assessment level. We have reserves enough to cover our potential risks that we're seeing in the market, both related to dry hydro conditions, which we have actually an extra hydro stabilization reserve to help cover that. So we're in good shape there. Our distribution operating reserve is also going to be right near the minimum guidelines. But again, even given all of this, we feel that we can safely get by with not having a rate increase in this particular for the FY22 timeframe. And I think that I don't really have a recommendation slide since we didn't really have that much in the way of recommendations other than a 0% rate increase for FY22. And any questions you may have, I look forward to them.
I think what we could do maybe is just put the staff report up on the screen.
Yes. Let me stop sharing
For the
this.
list of recommendations.
Yes. And let me bring up the staff report real quick. My apologies.
While he gets that up, are there any commissioners with questions or comments? Vice Chair Siegel.
Thanks. I just have 2 comments, and they apply equally to the gas and electric utility, which is when we're thinking about CIP, and it seems that sometimes we have a challenge with that staffing is one of the barriers to doing a project earlier rather than later. And then we inevitably, the cost goes up when we defer those projects. And I'm just wondering if there is an analysis of some sort done to either look into whether it might be cheaper with hiring consultants to do it, or putting someone on staff to do a project sooner rather than deferring with which seems to be, at this point, always increased costs as time goes on.
This is Dave. Yeah, and I could jump in for this question. This is Dave. Engineering has been actually looking at options to do design builds with consulting companies. So instead of just relying on our staff to build it all, design it, we are looking for other options as well to do both in an RFP now. Whereas previously we would do the design and go out to bid for the construction. There could be a lag or deferral of the project. So we're trying to look at the alternative method now to do all at one time. If that helps.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks.
I think also from an operational standpoint, we are looking to bring on another contractor along with the crew that we already have from contracting that's doing some work for us. We did just contract a large pole replacement project, 60 poles. It'll be in this budget. There's another project for another 60 poles to be replaced. That contractors will be in place since we don't have the adequacy of the resources in-house yet. But we are in a process of looking at hiring some apprentices, and we just really realized at this point that, and it's been over the last years, that we just have to grow within. It will take some time for those folks to move through the program. Apprenticeship programs, 4 years. It's usually about 7 years by the time that they actually feel pretty comfortable being a full-time line person. So we need to build for the future. But I think in the short period, as Dave said, we're bringing on consultants from the engineering perspective as well as from the operational side.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. And then my other question is on the very other end of things, but with the communications plan, which was on page 40 or something, I'm wondering whether we could add a separate line item that's communications about electrification, so that we have it as its own category and it's thought about that way and addressed. as such. And that was all. Thanks.
Does anybody on staff want to respond to any of that, or?
I think it's a good recommendation, and I will look to try and make that change in the financial plan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other raised hands? I'm not seeing any, so I'll go ahead and ask my question. I've never looked very hard at the Palo Alto Green rate schedules, but I did this time, and I'm just curious. I guess I have two questions about them. One is if I understand, it is for businesses that want to sort of whatever the certification they're looking for, Palo Alto's carbon neutral electric portfolio doesn't cut it, so they've requested a rate where they can be 100% renewable, and Palo Alto Utilities facilitates the purchase of RECs. And so one of my questions is it just to cover the hydro portion, which is not eligible as a renewable, or does the utility just purchase RECs for their entire energy usage and not sort of do the accounting for which part of their usage came from Palo Alto's renewable portfolio? Does that question make sense?
It does, and I must admit I'm not wholly confident in answering exactly what portion of that it seeks to cover. So I can look into that and see about getting you an explanation on that.
Yeah, I was just curious kind of how it works. And my other question about it was, given that part of this financial plan is chewing it up to better reflect the actual costs of renewable energy credits, why not have those be just a pass through the way, for example, natural gas commodity charges are passed through to customers? In fact, I think the text of the report said it's intended to be a pass through, but then it sort of has to pick a rate that is the best guess as to what the REC prices are. Is it just, it would be too complicated and it's not worth it?
Yeah, I believe that would be the case. We don't have that many customers actually on that particular rate. So it's literal handful.
So it just makes more sense to just pick a number and then true it up from time to time.
Correct. Yes. We have a separate company who actually goes out and purchases the RECs for us based upon what customers have used. So yes, there's a whole accounting process. It's easier to true it up after the fact.
Gotcha. All right, well, that's it for me. I see Councilmember Filseth's hand is up as well.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to ask a question. So yeah, we always compare ourselves with PG&E, and rightly so, right? How come, any insight why Santa Clara is less expensive than we are?
Second is initially they have a different generation portfolio mix than we do. So they have some of their own generation and so that helps.
Okay. Another really big answer is that Santa Clara has been seeking load growth for a long time. They're an industrial city and large industrial uses like data centers and the stadium, well, maybe not the stadium, but they're more cost efficient to serve. They have a very small residential load compared to their large industrial load.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, sure. There's a lot of data centers in Santa Clara. Yeah, they've done a lot of that. Okay. So just sort of scale economies in large, interesting.
Right.
Because so it's the Silicon Valley 2021 index says that they're nearly carbon neutral too. So, okay, thank you.
All right, well, if there's no further discussion or questions, I will ask again if there's a motion.
I'll move that we adopt the recommendation as it appears on the screen.
Points 1 through 7.
Points 1 through 7.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Quick roll call. Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Danaher,
Yes.
and I vote to approve as well. So that carries unanimously. Which brings us to our final topic. The water utility financial plan with no rate increase this year. And I will yet again check if any member of the public wishes to talk about the water utility financial plan.
Please raise your hand if you would like to speak to this item. No hands are raised.
All righty. Great, then why don't we go straight? I assume there's yet another staff presentation.
Yes.
Excellent.
I will go ahead and share my screen. And looks like, Dean, you were going to say something? No, I just go ahead. Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see the presentation? Yes. Okay, my name is Lisa Belier, and I'm a resource planner in the utilities department. And I wanted to check with you, but I'm planning on going through some of the key slides on cost and revenue and the reserves and the recommendation and overview information, and check if that will work for you.
Yeah, I think so. I think you can assume that we've read the report and had a chance to look at it, so you can move fairly quickly, but I think it's good to do a basic overview.
Okay. So in the water utility, there's no rate increase proposed for fiscal year 22, with 5% rate increases in each of the subsequent years, 23 through 26. And those increases are primarily due to expected wholesale rate increases from San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, where we purchase all of our potable water. The fiscal year 2020 year-end operations reserve was at the maximum guideline level, with additional funds considered unassigned. This financial plan brings the operations reserve to within guideline levels by the end of 2022 and to approximately target levels by 2023 and the remainder of the forecast period, the 5-year period. Last year, I wanted to just make a note that the council approved a plan to make a more active use of the CIP reserve and in the water utility. And so this year, the plan continues that approach, where we would transfer about $8 million into the CIP reserve for funding the CIP budget, as well as requesting to transfer up to $5 additional million to the CIP reserve for one-time seismic reservoir replacement costs. And staff will reevaluate the need for those transfers once the year-end 2021 reserve numbers are known. So this chart shows the cost categories in the stacked bar. It's similar to the charts that Eric showed, and shows the 5 most recent recorded years through 2020, the current year 2021, and the 5 upcoming projected years. And I just wanted to note the orange bars show the CIP for the water utility, but going forward from 2021 through 2026, they show the annual amount transferred to the CIP reserve, as well as any one-time transfers. So the actual CIP spending amount is going to be shown in the CIP reserve that I'll show you separately. So this shows you the operations reserve. Currently it's at the maximum guideline level. And this plan, as I mentioned, brings the operations reserve to approximately target levels by 2023, and then it remains there for the remainder of the 5 years. And it does look like it's going down a little bit in 2026, but it comes back up and stays within the guideline range. And for a brief view of the CIP reserve, this shows the fluctuating balance that you can, that will occur with the every other year main replacement program, as well as the one-time, as I mentioned, the one-time reservoir replacements for the 3 remaining reservoirs that need seismic upgrades. And with that, I'm going to skip to the recommendation. Oops. Went a little bit too far. And basically it's fairly simple, just recommending to the Finance Committee to recommend that the council adopt the resolution approving the financial plan and the transfer of the 13 million, which is made up of those 2 components, the 8 million for the CIP regular CIP program, including main replacements, as well as the 5 million for the one-time reservoir replacements. And with that, I look forward to your feedback and questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any comments or questions? All right. We're a silent bunch. That it speaks to how thorough the report and presentation were. You've predicted and answered any question that we might have been able to come up with. I myself have only one very oddball question that popped into my head as I read this. Looking at the rate schedules, I'm curious, what rate schedule is the city golf course on?
I'm going to defer that question. It could be that it's on the irrigation rate schedule, but I'm not, I can't confirm that right now.
Fair
I
enough.
believe it's largely on the irrigation rate schedule.
Gotcha. Okay. So then I was wondering who was on, my other question was who's on irrigation volumetric rates. Very good. It's not super pertinent to this conversation, but you satiated my curiosity.
Right. I don't have like a list of customers, but it's the customers that have a separate irrigation meter.
I see. Okay. Commissioner Johnston.
Well, actually, just following on that, I know that, for example, the multifamily building that I live on has separate meters for our irrigation. So we pay on the W7 rate. And on that question, I'm wondering why the commodity rate for irrigation is so much higher than for the other rates. I mean, is the cost of service higher for irrigation?
Yes, we look at that in the cost of service study and look at the amount of use, the peaking use across different time periods to calculate and update the cost to serve each of the customer groups.
Okay, well, interesting. Thank you.
Councilmember Philseth.
Hi, thanks. Sorry to keep asking all these weenie questions, and these will be another couple, but if it goes to finance, I'll just ask them there. So I figure I might as well ask them here. Right? Couple things. One is the operations cost is going up 5% a year is what it looks like. It's in the report, and it looked to me like it was actually a little bit higher than 5% a year, although not as high as 6% a year. But you know, CPI these days is like 2% or less a year. So if that continues, we got to make sure that we're budgeting for that in the city, because the city's assumptions on sort of general costs are not 5 or 6% cost increase, at least operations costs is not 5 or 6% a year. And I realize utility is a little bit different than the general fund, but that's quite a bit higher than the city projects in the long-term financial forecast. Okay, so if that's the case, you know, we sort of need to understand that.
Can you clarify where you're seeing, you said operations costs increasing by 6%?
I'm on page 19. And it's actually, I get somewhere between 5.25 and 5.7, depending on which years you look at and so forth. So, I mean, it's near 5. Let's see, where is it? Oh, and it's all on, yeah, here it is, page 27. Overall operations cost increased 5% a year on average. And I think it's actually slightly higher than that. That's on page 27. In any case, they're both, you know, 2.5x versus or 3 times CPI in the Bay Area. So I think, you know, we need to make sure that we got to focus on that and we understand what the drivers of that are.
Okay.
And my other, sorry,
Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but that operations increase is averaged over several years, and it includes both sort of inflationary increase or increases in salaries and benefits and other operational costs. But there's also a large one-time increase in the budget related to placing generators at a number of the leasing generators to place at a number of the pump stations, right?
So that's true going forward, but I think he's looking at recorded numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
for
you're
the
right.
last from 2016 through 2020 is the statement that he's looking at, and
yeah.
so
actually the truth is I was looking at both, and they're not that different across the time periods, whether you're looking at the last 5 years or the next 5 years or over 10. They're actually not that different, even including the one-time expense.
yeah, then I would underscore what Jonathan mentioned about the one-time generator lease costs and the going forward.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like it's actually, I mean, it doesn't look like it's actually an impact that throws off the numbers over the long run tremendously, right? And obviously in that 1 year it would.
Yeah, the operations costs going forward are not increasing as much as 5%. I think it's more like 3%. What's going up more like 5 or 6% is the San Francisco, the wholesale cost, which is about half of the overall cost for the utility.
I think for when it comes to finance, can you check that? Because looking at the chart, it doesn't look like that, but you know, I'm reading it off the bar graph, so
okay.
Can you check that when it comes to finance? Because it'll come to finance, right? So can you check that?
Yes. Thank you for that feedback. Mm-hmm.
We also made that statement in the financial plan where you noted it on page 27, so we can get you more background on that.
That'd be awesome. And then my second question is, actually, I learned something that I didn't know, which is Hayward is actually on SFPUC. Is that right?
Yes.
Because looking at the rate comparisons, I mean, we look at us versus the average, but actually, you know, there's sort of a cluster that's on SFPUC and then a cluster that's not. Right?
Yes.
You know, and all of us who are on SFPUC are, you know, significantly more than you know, drilling it out of groundwater and stuff like that in the South Bay. And, you know, I mean, everybody I know says, yeah, Palo Alto water's, you know, a lot better than Sunnyvale's, right? And so forth. So I got that, right? So, and that's I think we're on that. I was curious about Hayward, because if Hayward's on SFPUC, you know, most of us are comparable. Hayward's substantially less. They're like 20% lower than we are in terms of residential water rates. And if their structure, I'm looking at the pie chart on page 7, if their structure is 50% water supply and the rest of it is a combination of capital and operations. If they're 20% less overall and they've got the same cost for the half of it that's the supply, then they must be 40% less on capital and operations, right? Am I actually thinking that the right way? And I'm curious how come they're such an outlier? Do we know?
We have some thoughts about that. You're probably right. Because they do have some lower costs. They also have some other features that are different. One thing is that on their non-residential side, their usage has been going up over the last 10 years or so by the non-residential usage has grown by about 10%, whereas in Palo Alto over the last 10 years or so, the non-residential use is actually declining over that same time period. So that very different look at their overall usage is one of the factors that's different about Hayward than Palo Alto. We looked at a group of comparisons across the 8 other cities that also use Hetch Hetchy water, 100%. And Hayward is the lowest of that group.
Yeah, I know, and it's not, and significantly so, right?
And they do have almost twice as many customers as Palo Alto. So we noticed within that group that the larger utilities may experience some economies of scale because they have the lowest rates. So, you know, the lowest is Hayward, and then Palo Alto and Redwood City, and then all the rest of the cities that are 100% Hetch Hetchy water have even higher rates.
Is it possible that they're getting different rates from SFPUC on Hetch Hetchy water than we are? You wouldn't think so, right?
No,
okay.
They're not. They're paying.
Because that means there must be a, I mean, the difference of the things that you talked must make a really big difference, okay? Because they must have a really significant difference on the non-supply stuff in order to make such a difference overall.
There's one other really key difference, and that is that Palo Alto has a very prudent and consistent investment in CIP over the last couple of decades. And so when we looked at the financial statements for Hayward versus Palo Alto, the amount of investment in Palo Alto's water utility is significantly more and over a long period of time. And so the engineering assessment is that Palo Alto's system is very reliable because of that investment.
So we're at 21 to 26. Well, actually, this is cost increases. Okay, so you think the capital side is that much different?
It's quite different. I don't have the numbers per CCF in front of me, but over many years, Palo Alto has invested more in its.
Well, we have a different topography too. I mean, we got hills and stuff like that. Right? So
true.
Customers up in the foothills and so forth. So. Okay. Well, it's curious. So. Yeah. So Hayward is interesting. All right. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Danaher.
Oh, hi. A couple of points. Lisa, thank you for the excellent presentation. If you cover this and I missed it, excuse me, but if we have water conservation measures instituted this year with, call it 25% cut or something in our usage requirements, that would make a bigger dent in the budget than you've planned for. In the past, have we just adopted surcharges? I'm trying to remember back the last drought, how we would respond.
Yes, there were surcharges in the drought.
Okay, so we can adopt that mid-year if we see that happening.
I don't know the process if that would be possible by mid-year. I would have to.
Fiscal year.
I would have to. Those surcharges are there, but I'm not quite sure of the steps that we would need to take in order to implement them mid-year. I don't know what lead time would be necessary for that.
All right. I don't know how we did it the last time around, but presumably we can respond if that situation comes up. The other point is not about your presentation of the resolutions per se, but just a reminder, we've talked in past meetings, and Greg Sharp had brought this up, about the major investment we have in the Palo Alto canopy and our gardens and the like. And should Palo Alto be investing to have more emergency water reserves so we can protect our landscaping if the time comes? And just this presentation reminds me of that we don't have that in our planning right now, and maybe it's something we ought to consider, or at least look at what that would involve. So that's for you and Jonathan and Dean to think about. Those are my only comments.
So can I answer Commissioner Denhart on those two? So last time when we went to and put the surcharge portion of it through, we actually had to go to council. So we went to council, didn't have to wait for mid-year. We just went whenever we needed it, and we felt that the surcharge on the drought could happen to get approval on that. The rates have been kind of set. So we would do the same thing if we got into that situation. So it would be whatever timeline that we would need. And then also too is that engineering has been looking for, we're also thinking about looking more into the, not so much up in the hills, but actually looking at building another reservoir, maybe decommissioning, not building, as Lisa mentioned, we put $5 million away to actually completely rebuild one of the, actually build a brand new reservoir. Those reservoirs are coming to a life end up there. We don't think that we need all the water up there. So we are looking to build something like what we did at El Camino, more of a large underground tank, and then increase that size so that we would have a little bit more storage at that period of time. So we have been looking at that. We're trying to find some property and where it would be the best place to put it.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
I'm not sure when the right time is. I'd like to correct a previous answer.
Go for it.
It's regarding your question about the where the Palo Alto Golf Course gets its water, which rate schedule it gets its water, and it's primarily recycled water.
Ah.
I also just, sorry, if unless we want to talk about that more, I also just wanted to add one thing in response to Commissioner Danaher's question about water storage.
Sorry, actually, can I just ask a follow-up
Please.
question? So is there a separate rate schedule for recycled water? So I don't see it on the page where I was looking at rate schedules.
No, there's no rate schedule.
So it's free?
So
yes, I see Director Bachelor nodding his head.
yeah, and this is a long-term question that we're going to have to sort through at some point. We are connecting a few customers here and there to recycled water. It is currently free, but we are going to need to form a utility and set rate schedules at some point around that. A lot of the reason we've held off on that has been that we've been waiting for some level of resolution on expansion of recycled water. But it's something that's in our work plan for the next couple of years.
I'm glad to hear that. It's, I mean, it certainly has value. So on some level, it's a shame to give it away. Although to give it away to a public entity makes sense on some level. Councilmember Filseth.
Sorry, this one's really short now. I'm almost ashamed to ask this, but the lake in Foothills Park, there's no connection to the city water system from that, is there?
Yes, my understanding is that it is primarily filled. That came up at the Finance Committee, and we were talking about it, and it is primarily filled with Hetchy water.
From the city?
Yes.
Really? I had no idea. Right? Okay. So we pump water up there and put it in Foothills in the lake, and then we pump it back? Or I guess we don't, right?
That part I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we pump it back out.
Yeah, okay. But we fill it on the municipal water system.
That's correct. Yeah, we were kind of shocked about that too.
I'll be darned. I had no idea.
We didn't know either. Till you asked that question, and we actually had to look into it.
Does it function as a reservoir, or does it just function as for recreation and aesthetics?
I guess I could answer Commissioner Danaher's answer about having extra water laying around, but yeah, it just actually just sits there. We have no way to actually pump it out unless we use manual pumps if we had to.
Really? I mean, it's not full of algae or anything like that. So
wildlife.
We don't chlorinate it, right?
Yes.
How about that? I had no idea. Okay, thanks.
And Assistant Director Ebenschein, I cut you off earlier. You were about to make another comment.
Yes, coming back to Commissioner Danaher's question about and sorry for the background noise, Commissioner Danaher's question about the looking at additional water supplies. So I just wanted to mention that the SFPUC is also looking for additional water supplies on behalf of its customers as a way of making sure they're able to maintain the 20% level of service goal in a drought. And so, you know, I think, still can look at still can consider our options. But I just want to remind everyone that we're looking at raising or basically doing better than the SFPUC's level of service goal, which is to need only 20% cuts in a drought that lasts over 8 years.
All right. Are there any further questions or comments? Well, thanks again for the report. Commissioners, does anybody wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation as it is, slide 13.
Can we put that back up?
Yes, just one moment.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okie doke. Taking votes, Commissioner Jackson,
I vote yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Vice Chair Siegel,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Danaher,
Approved?
and I vote yes as well. So the recommendation is unanimously approved. All right, which brings us to the next item, commissioner comments and reports from meetings or events.
Yeah.
Commissioner Danaher.
Yes, thank you. I don't know am I on mute? Okay. Damn it. Yeah, just briefly, I keep track of technology trends and talk to a lot of people. So I'll mention two that want to keep our eye on. There is more acceleration in vehicle to grid technologies, some trials going on in Japan and in the UK. And as we talk about distributed storage and the like, resilience for the city, I think in years to come, that'll be a factor with our EV penetration. And I think our AMI infrastructure will help, but ultimately we'll want to be able to have some control over the infrastructure to help with peak demands and blackouts and so forth. So that technology is coming along and may play a factor for us going forward. Secondly, there's been a real surge in investments happening now in investments in hydrogen technologies to reduce the cost of producing hydrogen, enabled mostly by the severe drops in the cost of renewable energy. So if you can use renewable energy to power the processes to make hydrogen or other fuels, then you get renewable or clean fuels that you can use. And a lot of them are going to be used for industrial applications to power industrial processes, but are also beginning to be some discussion of how you could at some point replace natural gas with hydrogen in municipal systems. It require aligning the pipes, but that's a known technology and the like. So as we think about our infrastructure, too early to make plans now, but maybe in a few years we'll be looking ahead to a point where we replace natural gas rather than going electrification on everything. So those are my comments.
Commissioner Danaher, on hydrogen, So do you know what the operating pressures are? It's got to be high, right?
I think there are different technologies, and people are trying to address that problem too, so that you don't need the high pressure pipes that you would for, if you're transporting it, say in a vehicle, you've got to have it very compact. So that means higher pressure, and if going in pipes or some other applications, it may not be need to be under such high pressure.
Okay.
But but I haven't had those kind of detailed discussions.
Thank you.
And this is a ways off. Interesting early new trends to keep an eye on. I'm done, Lisa.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments or reports from meetings or events? All right.
Lisa, my apologies, if I may.
All good.
I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to comment to the Rec Exchange program and the report on the Rec Exchange. I was surprised to see bucket 3 rates at 28% higher than anticipated. That seems substantial. Do we know why? Because it's only a 6-month period roughly from when it's not even 6 months because we started selling almost immediately in June, and suddenly we have a 28% increase in the bucket 3 rents. And if we're forecasting that the bucket 3s are going to be that much more expensive going forward, our projections for revenue come off substantially. Perhaps not substantially, but it is noteworthy. Let's put it that way. Do we know why?
So I'm wondering if we should agendize this or maybe respond to the comment offline. Are we able to speak to this since it's an informational item? If so, I can answer as best I can, but I just want to make sure.
That's a really good question. I wonder if we should, in fact, agendize that for a future discussion. I don't think we're supposed to have a full-fledged conversation about something that's not on the agenda.
No worries. I'll raise the question and we can address it next time. If we can just address the 30% increase in bucket 3 rents.
Yeah, and the question was specifically about whether we're forecasting it to be, we're forecasting those trends to continue in the future. Yeah, okay.
That's actually a good segue into our final item, selection of future topics for upcoming meetings. Are there other topics that commissioners have on mind to discuss in future meetings? Vice Chair Siegel.
Thanks. I mentioned it last month, but I didn't see it listed here, an update on sea level rise. And then I think after some of the discussion we've had today, it might be helpful to have a discussion about our recycled water plans. And I am interested if we're considering adding a new utility. I did happen to read the utility statute, and we do the UAC statute, and recycled water is part of the UAC. So that was sort of interesting. And that was all.
Thanks. Commissioner Jackson.
My question was, on the rolling calendar, it says that on April, they're anticipating this DSD permit process agenda item. Do we know if that's going to be in fact in April, or do we not know yet?
We are moving forward. We will have that presentation in April next month.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Danaher.
Oh yeah, just down at the bottom says to be scheduled quarterly informational and EV charger. My suggestion would just do it the last month of each quarter, and include a half page or a page in the materials, and not take much time on it. But that's for staff to tell us if that's practical.
Commissioner Smith.
We've talked about this in the past, but I do want to raise it again simply because it is nearly a full year. Are we talking about moving back to a 7 p.m. start, or are we keeping it 4? Because adjusting to a 4 p.m. start is, I think it's been aired in the past, and it's certainly true today as well. 4 p.m. start is difficult for me, but given the fact that we are to be open to the public, I'm concerned that the public doesn't have access at 4 o'clock because they're either still coming home from work or they're still at work. So is there a notion in our head, if you will, collective, that we're moving back to a later start? Because I would like to raise that as a possibility.
Yeah, Commissioner Danaher, are you
Well,
responding to Commissioner Smith?
To chime in, I've also voiced in the past that it creates difficulties for me. It did again today. You know, it's weighed into my decisions of whether to stay on the commission or not. So I don't want to see this 4 p.m. continue forever. It's a difficulty. And I think Lauren makes a good point that for access by the public to do it during working hours is also more difficult. So I see this as a pandemic response, not.
Yeah, I mean, my sense was that we always intended it to be a measure we were taking during shelter in place and during Zoom, and to sort of help combat Zoom fatigue, as well as acknowledging that for some members of the public, given that it was on Zoom, it was actually easier to attend during the day than in the evening. But I think it's absolutely fair to raise it again. It's been a long time now. And I'm curious what other commissioners think. I know some of us have more flexibility, some of us have less flexibility. I mean, obviously there's no perfect time for the public and there's no perfect time for us, but what's the preference out there? Go ahead, Vice Chair Siegel.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm pretty flexible, so it's not so much about me, but as I recall, one of the reasons we went earlier was because while we're doing it over Zoom, it was much easier for staff to be able to support the Zoom side of it, doing it earlier. So it would be helpful to hear from them if there's a.
That's a good point as well. Feel free to chime in, staff. Meanwhile, Commissioner Jackson.
I've been a proponent of earlier is better. I understand that's a hardship for the commissioners who have full-time jobs. But you know, like when you go through a long, 3 hour, you start at 7, you end at 10 o'clock at night. Sometimes a lot of detail. My mind is not as crisp from between 7 and 10 as it is earlier in the day. So I like being crisper, and earlier is crisper for me. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Well, okay, a bunch of hands. The other thing that's going through my head is now I'm wondering if we're having a discussion that's not agendized. I don't know where selecting a time falls on this. We've gotten this far. Some people have had their say, so I guess we should let everybody have their say. But let's maybe not make a decision tonight. Commissioner Johnston.
I was just going to say I'm flexible, either one.
Thank you for that. All right, well, I'm flexible as well, but in all honesty, maybe we should take an agendized 15 minutes next month,
we can add it to the agenda to have a little bit more of a conversation on this, Chair.
Okay.
So
I don't know if that's overkill, but I'd rather stay within the bounds of how we're supposed to operate.
No, well, I think it's okay because we're going to put it on the rolling calendar. So we just don't think we want to take the vote tonight. So
yeah, exactly.
We will definitely we'll put something together real quick for having a conversation on this.
Yeah, and then for what it's worth, I mean, we hypothesize about what works for the public. If it's on the agenda, then the public will have the opportunity to weigh in.
Right.
So let's see. I have a couple of items for future topics myself. One is I was looking back at past meetings, and I think it was in August was when Magellan came and gave the presentation about the phases of work that they were going to do. And phase one started at some point in the summer, I think it was July, and was going to take 6 or 7 months. And then we also, I think they were moving some of the phases to run concurrently with phase one, all by way of saying if Magellan has sort of completed a set of analyses, it would be great to maybe have a follow-up presentation from them and find out what they learned and how it's looking.
So Chair Fussell, next month we have a fiber update, which is Magellan.
Oh, that's what that is.
Yep. So we push it to April. They've done a lot of analysis. We're actually going to bring, not sure how we're going to do this, but it's going to be having a discussion as well as an action item. Staff wants to move forward with moving to go to council to ask them to approve phase 2 and phase 4 of the plans. We'll bring those back to you again. But then also there's going to be an analysis that will go into the fiber, talk about the fiber backbone, a little bit about what we've learned so far from a business case. And so we probably are going to put it at least an hour, maybe a little longer. We may not be able to get through everything next month. We'll probably have to reshuffle a little bit, but there will be definitely an update as well as, like I said, an action that we'll ask for a recommendation.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. And the other one is the other topic I have in mind, and is not urgent, like 2021. Early 22, but I mentioned this on the pre-meeting call. I'm curious about cybersecurity and what processes the city has in place to protect against hackers. And I'm wondering if at some point we can get an informational report. Just to educate ourselves about how the city is thinking about this and how the utilities is thinking about, to what extent the utilities are automated and vulnerable to cyber threats, and what steps the city and the utility are taking to protect itself.
Would you like to have a discussion on that, or just informational report? Would you like to talk about it a little bit?
I'm curious if other commissioners would be interested in having it as a discussion item. Don Jackson looks interested.
Yes.
Vice Chair Siegel's nodding.
I'm concerned and interested in this topic as well. So again, it's not urgent, but
when we do it, have it a discussion item, not just a report that we read.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so we'll make it a discussion then.
Thank you. Councilmember Felseth.
Yeah, maybe if I can throw out something on that topic. I suspect there's some intersection with this already, but we have a new auditor, and the audit plan just got presented to council this week, in fact, 2 nights ago. And one of the main things that they're going to be looking at is cybersecurity for IT, right, in the city. And we went through this process of outsourcing the city auditing function. And we selected, after a long evaluation of multiple vendors, we selected Baker Tilly. A couple of the things that we really liked about them was they had a lot of expertise in cybersecurity and also a lot of expertise in utilities. And so as you consider this, maybe one of the things that you folks might want to look at as part of the arrows in your quiver for this problem is go see if there's some role for the new city auditor too, because they have a lot of knowledge in this area. So.
Councilmember Philseth, I was thinking the same thing, because I'm sure that utilities will be part of that cybersecurity because of our SCADA systems and things. So I was thinking that
Undoubtedly, there's some intersection already, yeah.
right. So I was thinking that that's in the first phase of that audit program. So if we can, commissioners, if we can take a little bit of time and get the report back from the auditors as well, and we can take a look at that report, and then we can share that out, and then still have a discussion with it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that whole area was a high priority for council too, right? So in general. Well, you pick up the newspaper every morning and read about solar, wind, or whatever, and you go, oh.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion of future topics? Okay. Well then, that's it for official business. Is there, how do we usually do the motion to adjourn? We all just agree?
I so move.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for the great presentations.
Yes,
Yeah,
agreed.
good efficient meeting. Thank you.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. See y'all next month.
Bye-bye.